I'll cut off all the times you look to the...
Thanks. And this part.
What part?
Oh, good point. Anyway.
This is totally going to be in the credits. The gag reel.
My name is Chris Bowles. I am a student at Wichita State University, and I am going to be talking about a topic that has been more recent in later times. It is called criminal justice reform. Now, what is criminal justice reform to be exact? Well, in short, criminal justice reform is the changing of perceived errors within the criminal justice system. Now, this can include, but not be limited to, laws, sentencing, and how police officers kind of handle situations. So their training, essentially. Now, for criminal justice reform, one of the biggest topics of it is, are you for it or are you against it? Well, the answer to that is obviously up to the person. My own opinion, I would say that I am both for it and against it. I do believe there are things within it that should stay the same. However, I do believe that there are things that should be different. For example, one thing that should be different is due to our changing times in terms of legalizing marijuana here in the United States, in certain states, eventually it's going to hit every state. There's no question. But I do believe when it comes to marijuana laws, they should definitely change. Mostly because if it's becoming legalized in other states, and I get a lot of states are saying that marijuana is bad. Well, with that being said, people are more prone to fighting for the legalization of it, more citizens anyway. And since that's the case, the government should listen to the citizens in this. But
We the people.
as it stands, most people are, or most of the government will not listen to the citizens if it is out of compliance with how they see things. A lot of people also believe that when it comes to sexual assault laws, that there should be harder punishments for it. Because as it stands right now, statistically speaking, here in the state of Kansas, a person who has 3 convictions of possession of marijuana with the intent to sell will be put in jail, not prison, jail, for no less than 8 years. However, for people who have sexual assault charges against them, their range as a felony ranges anywhere from 5 years to at least life in prison, which is roughly 32 years. So, a lot of people think that should change for the sexual assault laws. Mostly, they feel as though the 5-year limit shouldn't be the minimum. It should be a lot more. And it's for the safety of, children and others, men, women, even transgender people, everyone. But, anyway, now going on to what I believe should change about the criminal justice system. Well, thanks to Donald Trump's criminal justice reform bill that got passed December 21st, 2018, we as a nation now have for our federal laws, anyone who has 3 convictions of the same crime against each other or against something will serve no less than 25 years in prison. Maybe not federal prison, but no less than 25 years.
Dang.
I do think that needs to change a bit. 25 years is pretty rough. That's pretty rough. However, that being said, there are, leeways that within that reform bill that allow people to get out earlier from what they're actually sentenced to. It also brings a bigger light to how we as Americans and most of law enforcement, not all of it, typically discriminate against African Americans. It brings a bigger light, meaning it's trying to get rid of the discrimination that has been seen within the federal prison and the state level prisons. As it stands, here in the United States, 2.2 million people by the end of 2018 were in prison. Not jail, prison. And over the past 40 years, from 2018 and every year prior to it, that has increased by no less than 500%.
Jesus.
And that's pretty bad. Now, you guys are probably wondering, what are most of those crimes? Well,
Marijuana.
a lot of people believe they are to be violent crimes.
It's marijuana.
It's not the case. It's drug crimes. The war on drugs ever since Bill Clinton really cracked down on it. Cracked down.
Cracked.
It made it so people who want to do illegal drugs are no longer have the ability to see themselves getting out in any time less than a year. Which, any time less than a year would be a misdemeanor, because a felony is classified by at least 1 year in jail. That being said, our drug offenders, if you look at the entire population of our prison system, our drug offenders make up roughly about 64.8%. The remaining 35.2% of offenders are either sexual assault or violent crimes in nature. And that's bad. That's bad when most of our jail population in the United States is mostly drug offenders. I get the reasoning behind it. Drugs can make you do some pretty bad things. Crack, cocaine, heroin. They can make you go crazy.
If you do too much.
If you do too much. And they can actually pose a bigger threat to your own life than other people's. Especially heroin if you detox. And then you're like, just one more time. Your body's not gonna like that. So, but I do believe our prison system should change in terms of drug laws. I do think that they need to change and have not as much of a harsh sentencing, but more or less a sentencing with rehabilitation and a lot of other programs that are offered within the criminal justice system. Another thing I believe should change is health care within our criminal justice system, our prison system. Honestly, the health care in there,
They have it?
they do have health care in the prison system.
That's surprising.
But it's bad. It's really bad. And understand, people see prisoners as, they're the worst of the worst. Well, that's not always true.
Is this a private prison that we're talking about? 'Cause
No. If you go down to the South, in almost every state in the South, their health care is for prisoners usually consists of they will only go to the hospital if they are dying.
Wow.
That's usually it. So they could have cancer, and obviously if they have cancer, they're going to let them go to the hospital for chemotherapy if they have it, because we're all human. And even if someone did the worst thing imaginable, and we believe that they should, no longer live, we're still human. And we, as a greater being, believe people should not die from something such as cancer. But as it stands, the healthcare is extremely bad. Most people especially down in Louisiana in their super prison, the healthcare there, if someone is sick, they have an entire med bay for people. However, even though I've never personally been there, I've seen a lot of documentaries, and obviously documentaries they sometimes stretch things out of proportion. But that being said, the documentaries usually talked about how the healthcare down there consisted of people who were sick, laying down in a bed and staying in the med bay until they were better. And, the prison nurses would bring them their medicine if they had prescriptions and whatnot, due to the whole drug liking and addiction and everything that's going on down there. But, so, that's really as much as they do. Now, what happens if, say, sodomy happens down in a prison, which is a male forcefully putting themselves on another male? And as in Latin terms, this is called male rape. Now, a lot of people believe males can't be raped. Not true. That's why it's called sodomy. But when it comes down to it, in the event that happens, and depending on how bad the injuries are from it, the inmate that was the victim will be taken to a hospital. However, if the injuries are not too bad, just maybe a little bit of bleeding here, but nothing too serious, they'll let it go. And that's not safe, because even if it's just a little bleeding, it can still get infected. Bloodborne pathogens can, spread through that way. I believe Al Capone had something similar to that, where he was in prison and then something happened to him and he got a bloodborne pathogen from it. And he was the greatest mob boss in the United States, in history for the United States, was now sitting in a wheelchair, not able to function because of it. It basically destroyed his brain. But one last thing I believe should change in terms of our criminal justice system is the term hate crime. Not what it is, but the term itself. Because what constitutes a hate crime? A hate crime, by definition, is when one person actively seeks out another person of either a different race, gender, sexual orientation, etc., go down the list, and they deliberately mean to cause harm to them by destroying property and all these other things, writing, say, homo on their house in paint or anything. Just basically destroying property, attacking them.
Like burning of a cross in front of the yard.
Yeah, burning of a cross in front of the yard. That's
a huge one.
Yeah, that's the most well-known one. But I do believe this should change. Mostly because when it comes down to hate crimes, people who react to it, the victims in this case, will go ahead and if they say take action and they attack the offender who is doing it, so it turns into a fight, no guns, but just a good old-fashioned fist fight, then you know, the victim will also get in trouble for taking matters into their own hands. But I do believe hate crimes should change in that nature. It needs to be a little bit more cracked down in terms of how they speak. Now, in terms of what I believe should not change, everything that I did not discuss should not change. Honestly, our criminal justice system it's pretty good for what it is. You know, we've had many years of evolution for it. Oh, right, I guess there's one more thing they should change about it. How law enforcement handle and perceive certain victims/offenders. Now, it's no surprise that race is a huge issue in the criminal justice system. Heck, in Wichita, Kansas, for the longest time, there just happened to be a coincidence involving signposts where there was a signpost that said African American History Museum. There was another signpost that said Sedgwick County Jail. It was a coincidence. I don't think that was ever their original intention, but it was a thing, and they did change that. They got rid of that immediately when someone pointed it out. But there is no surprise that there is racial discrimination within the criminal justice system. People associate African Americans with more violent crimes and that they are more likely to commit a crime. While people may think that, that's not true. Honestly, African Americans have over a history been targeted because of the United States history. And it's been seen from generation to generation. The current generations are trying to change that. They're trying to. It's slowly happening, but I do believe that discrimination as a whole will end eventually. But, you know, it's going to be quite a long time before that happens. But anyway, if you find this video interesting, please leave a comment down
Like
below.
and subscribe.
You can like and subscribe to the page. But that being said, you know, just keep in mind that we're all trying to be respectful in the comments. So it's all constructive criticism is fine, but no, you know, hate or anything of that nature.
Negativity.
So, thank you for listening to my video. Okay, you're good.
What?
You're good.
I'm what?
Cut it.